Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions, capital raising, joint ventures, strategic alliances, real estate, affiliate and sponsorship deals, and more, including smaller deals that you can do without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for over 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest Podcast. Let's get started. John Ostenson is the CEO of FranBridge Consulting, a top 0.1% franchise consultant and the best-selling author of Non-Food Franchising. John draws on his experience as a former Inc. 500 franchise president and multi-brand franchisee in helping his clients select their franchise investments. John is a frequent contributor on franchising to publications such as Forbes and Bloomberg. John, welcome to the DealQuest Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Corey. Looking forward to our conversation.
So listen, I'm so excited to talk about franchising and your various experiences with it and what your company does, especially because I talk about all the time on this podcast on how this is a deals podcast, not just an M&A podcast, not just a capital raising podcast, as some others are, but we talk about all types of deals. Now, we tend to get more guests in the M&A and capital raising world because that's where a lot of deals are done, but we talk about licensing and joint ventures and strategic alliances, and certainly franchising is another type of deal. But before we get into all that, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old, because my guess is a franchise consultant probably wasn't what you were dreaming of being back then. So what did you want to do when you were a little kid? What were you thinking?
Great question. Yeah, thinking back, my father was an estate planning attorney. He was out on his own, and he did enough to pay the bills, but we never got ahead. I was probably the poorest kid in our little private school at the time, and yeah, so certainly that created drive, but it also showed me later on I would realize the need for a system, a framework for him to follow, and that's probably one of the reasons I'm endeared to franchising. But I know it's been an amazing run. I've had a lot of opportunities to support successful franchise owners across the country, and love helping audience members like yours step into business ownership either for the first time or to add to their portfolio. So yeah, excited to jump in here.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, so it's interesting, that early experience. A lot of people have the misperception that every lawyer makes a huge amount of money. And the truth is, if you look at the stats, a lot of them, don't get me wrong, they make a better living than a lot of people, certainly around the world and even in this country, but it's not, most of them are not getting rich so it's an interesting experience to that and have that be a driver for you to have a system around it, because a lot of that is missing in a lot of attorneys' business models. One other question looking back, what was the first deal of any type that you ever did? It could be something small when you were a kid, early in your career, or maybe it was in the franchise world, maybe it wasn't. You tell me.
Yeah, I'd say the first deal that comes to mind would be shortly after college. It was the 05, 06 period, a couple of years after school. And real estate couldn't go down, and partnered with another guy. Fortunately, he maintained solvency as well through this, but we bought some raw land. It was pre-development. And of course, then 07, 08 happened, and it became worth pennies on the dollar. And at the time, it was a huge number to us, but we just continued to make those monthly payments and stayed up to date, eventually sold it, took the tax benefit from the loss. But a lot of learnings through that experience.
Yeah, trust me. We all had a lot of learnings at that point. I had raised 2 real estate investment funds, not huge, but like $1 million here, $1.5 million there, whatever. And we had done some small condo conversions, and we'd invested in some multifamily buildings. And obviously through 2008, 9, to 10, got hurt on that. And we're able to recoup a majority of the investment for our investors, but definitely lost some money. So that was a time of a lot of lessons for various of us investors and deal makers.
No, when you've got investors behind you and it's other people's money, that does add to the pressure and keep you up at night, right?
No question. If you care at all. So, which I did. So, all right. So listen, let's hop in. I don't want to waste any time because I'm sure there's hours of content we could talk about franchising, and we've only got about 40 minutes more. So talk about this. And, one of the things that's interesting in your bio is, this, and obviously your book is about non-food franchising, because I think the default thinking for most people when they think about franchises is, McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's and Subway and on, right? I mean, the most prominent, at least in terms of brands as a category, are often the food franchises. So talk to us about, why don't we just start the differences between food and non-food and why you focus in non-food franchising?
Absolutely. When you look at the landscape out there, there's roughly 4,000 franchise brands in the U.S. today across the different industries. If you cut out the food side, that cuts out about half the market, but that's automatically what comes to mind, right? When you hear the F word franchise. And so I've got nothing against the food guys. I'm good friends with CEO of Chick-fil-A and others, but end of the day, we need to, when you step back from an ownership standpoint, I mean, we're all consumers of food. We need those guys. We support them. But my humble belief is from an ownership standpoint, there are easier ways to make money. There are ways to get involved in business ownership that require less capital up front, oftentimes fewer employees, less operating hours, oftentimes less susceptible to consumer whims, let's say. It's certainly from a trend standpoint. And then finally, lighter investment, higher margins as well, because you don't have perishables and such. So again, just easier ways to make money. We support food guys, but love some of these other industries, which I'm sure we'll jump into. Yeah, I love that. So in terms of the people you work with, are they mainly owner-operator types or investors who are buying maybe multiple franchises, or even if they're not doing multiple franchises, they're not operating in the business? Because there is this perception, again, which has truth in it in various areas, that franchising is an opportunity for somebody who's an employee and looking to basically, become the critics would say semi-entrepreneur, like you don't really, it's supported, but you will have these controls by the franchisor. And the critics would say you're buying yourself a job, but you feel independent, right? On the positive side, people would say, even for the owner operators, well, listen, it's great. It's a head start on starting a business. A lot of stuff you don't have to figure out. You got a franchisor model, you got support, you got advertising, you got, a proven model on how it works. But again, a lot of people think about, I'm trying to hit some of these sort of automatic misconceptions of people who don't know franchises. They may default to, this is something for owner operators, people who are going to be in the store at the printing franchise or whatever it is, right? So talk to me about that. Who are the people you work with and do they vary from that? Yeah, directionally, I would say about 1/3 of our clients are looking to fill an owner-operator approach to the business, and probably 2/3 are semi-absentee, semi-passive. Some call it an executive model. So on that owner-operator piece, kind of, you started touching on this. Yeah, when you compare it to a W-2 job, you're building your own empire, not someone else's. I hear that oftentimes, but it's beyond the cash flow. You're building an asset that should have exit value down the road. You're also able to get a lot of tax benefits. I mean, the tax code is written for real estate investors and business owners. That's what the government incentivizes. But when you look at the semi-passive approach, which again, I'd say we have clients that are doctors and lawyers and existing business owners that don't have a ton of time, or in some cases, W-2s of larger companies. In their case, they can put a manager in place day one to run the business for them. Most franchises allow for that. Not every one, but most of them do. I try to never sugarcoat it with our clients. There's still a lot of work that goes into standing up a business. And if I think it's going to take you 5 hours a week, it's probably going to take you 10 out of the gate. And if I think it's 10, it's going to take 15. So, I want people to go in eyes wide open and get to hear from other franchisees' experiences within that same system of how they run their businesses and the time that they put in. But the nice thing about franchising is it is doable and it's very common out there. And part of the reason there is if you have a good franchisor on the sidelines, they're able to support that manager with a lot of their day-to-day needs. And so they carry a lot of the water for you. Buck still stops with you as the owner, but they're able to really lean in and support you in a big way. Right. So 2/3 of the folks you work with are not owner operators, which is interesting. So who, you mentioned doctors, so who's the demographic? Like obviously on this spot, you and I have the EO, Entrepreneurial Organization Connection. A lot of those folks, a lot of my clients, a lot of these listeners here are entrepreneurs of various types. They're already running their own businesses. And, some of them are looking for diversification outside of having all of their capital and net worth tied up in one business. Certainly, that's people look at real estate investment as one opportunity to diversify, especially in situations where it's allegedly more passive and nothing is, as your point is. So is that the demographic? I also know, well-compensated high-end executives as well. But talk to me a little bit about who's that demographic who is not on the owner-operator side, but more on the executive, as you said, side of things. Yeah, I'd say, probably 80% of our clients fall between 35 and 55, certainly some on either side of that. But, What I oftentimes hear as a common thread is, again, wanting to build their own empire, wanting to diversify their investment portfolio. Probably 2/3 of our clients invest in real estate as well. I mean, me personally, I'm multi-brand franchisee now. Yeah, I've been a franchisor. I also invest in a bunch of real estate syndications. It's a little more passive than active, but across a number of different vehicles. Yeah. And so I'd say right now we're seeing a lot of real estate investors moving over because there's limited inventory in the market. You've got high interest rates, and they're saying, what are other tax advantaged investment opportunities to diversify outside the public markets? And so I go on a lot of real estate shows and work with a lot of real estate clients. And I do think there's a lot of parallels too from a mindset standpoint and how they think about that involvement in the business and creating cash flows that are there even when you're sleeping, but also there's a lot of direct tie-in. Just the type of business oftentimes complements maybe some of their real estate holdings. I'm happy to get into examples as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. So so let's talk about that a little bit. What are the types of, so we say non-food, right? Are there any particular sectors or industries in the non-food space that you guys really focus on, or that you think there's where the opportunities are showing up right now?
Yeah, I personally represent over 600 different franchise companies, kind of play matchmaker. Our clients never pay us a nickel. It's very much like a real estate model. I'm a real estate broker. And so it's a beautiful, clean model, but we'll work with all these different companies spanning a number of different industries. And I'd say what we're seeing right now, a whole lot of interest in things like home and property services. That could be everything from insulation to floor coatings to gutters to dumpsters. I'm invested in a driveway franchise. I'm invested in another one that's a concrete paving and line striping business for parking lots. These non-sexy niches. Yeah. Others like it as well as myself. Oftentimes it's bringing a white collar approach to a blue collar industry it's not going to be susceptible to trend. You're always going to need some of these services. It's industries like health and wellness. I mean, we all care more about health than ever before. And that can play out in everything from men's testosterone clinics to maybe to more senior care and specialized care. Things like kids, pets, the aging population, things that people will spend on regardless of the economy is where we're seeing a lot of interest. And so we've all been talking about a recession for a decade now, but if the economy ever does go south, what kind of business do you want to be in that's going to be resilient during those times?
Right. So let's say you're one of those folks who, and I'll focus a little more on those executive folks because that's more of our audience, I think, than somebody who's going to look to be an owner operator in a franchise. So when they start looking so they come to somebody like you, they say, hey, I'm interested in diversifying. Maybe they have an idea of industry. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just think it's a good opportunity. How do you guide them? And then what kind of due diligence? I mean, I know, and you might want to give the basics to the audience about it, that there is something called a UFOC and there's disclosures and all this kind of stuff, whatever. But that, and then beyond that, practically, what should people be looking at when they're considering and doing their due diligence on different franchise opportunities?
Yeah, I'd say first off, when people come to us, they oftentimes don't have any type of idea of what they want to get involved with. And that's what's fun. We love those light bulb moments. If they keep an open mind and a blank slate, those light bulb moments take place and they end up getting involved in something that was never on their radar. But we have a very streamlined process where we curate the top 10 or 12 opportunities in their market from our perspective, based on their situation, based on what we're seeing out there. We do more deals than anybody else in the country. And so we get a lot of perspectives. But we bring those to them and say, hey, here are the 10 that we think are the best fit for you across different industries that are available in the market. Take them through that. They pick 3 or 4 to have a conversation with. And then we kind of hold their hand through a series of calls and presentations after that. Your question around the due diligence side. So the goal is to get them as much information as possible during the process. I give enough information to kind of give them an indication of whether this is one they want to pursue. But then once they get into that process with the franchisor, every franchise system is regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. They've got what's called an FDD or franchise disclosure document, 23 different items within that. 2 that we pay a lot of attention to, just off the bat, would be your item 7, which is your all-in investment range, your item 19, which is their financial representation. But then you've got all these other pieces too. So those are audited numbers. So you have a lot more than a back of the napkin envelope, a calculation to go off of in building your pro forma. So that would be one data point. The franchisor can guide some, but they have to be pretty tight-lipped as far as not making representations outside of the item 19. But then they get a chance to talk to other franchisees in their system. It's what we call validation. So you get to have conversations and hear about their experience and ask them questions. And how fast was your ramp up? What were surprises? How is the franchisor supporting you? So your goal is to get these different data points prior to what's called a discovery day. And that's where you'd fly into their home office, spend a day or 2 with their team, make sure it's a good culture fit. get all the questions answered, any final due diligence. So again, is it entirely foolproof? No. Is it a whole lot better than what you have going into a startup? Yes. And because, in like-kind markets, this model's already proven profitable, right? And so it's just about going out and executing on it.
So just to be clear, because I use the term that might not be valid anymore, I am not a franchise attorney. I've certainly helped folks like set up entities that they need for franchise and look, but we have people who refer on the legal side. But there used to be something called a Uniform Franchise Offering Circular. I think it's called UFOC. Is now this disclosure document you mentioned? What they call it now, or the replacement or whatever the new name.
Yeah, the FDD is the new standard, right?
Yeah,
it used to be the UFOC. Yep.
Yeah, got it. Okay, great. So you see, I love this because I learned stuff as well from my guests on the podcast. So, okay, great. So somebody comes to you, that's great. You narrow it down. Listen, it's like when I look at, we do obviously a lot of M&A. We work with investment bankers and brokers. They're doing that as well. But the difference is, which is really interesting, the difference is most of the cases, in that case, well, not always, but more often, there's a particular industry, a particular, whatever the buyer, the potential buyer knows they want to go in, and they hire a banker or a broker to do that. But I actually know some folks who it's similar. They're just looking to deploy capital, looking to get into a new business, and they're doing it more generally, which sounds like it's often the case here that people don't have, like you said, they don't have that specific idea. Let's break down some of the things, some of the elements of a franchise deal, right? I mean, because there's the way, the enough I know to be dangerous in this area, like some key items, right? You're looking at, okay, what are you paying the franchisor and for what, right? There's licensing, there's advertising commitments, there's other things like that. So you want to break that down for us a little bit more on what the elements of these franchisor franchisee deals look like?
Yeah, typically you're paying the franchisor somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 or 7%, give or take, in what we call a royalty, and that's off of gross revenue. Now that gets built into all the financials that you review leading up to that. That's an expense. But you want to ask the question as you go through the process, what am I getting in exchange for that? Is it something that I'd be paying for on my own if I weren't in a franchise system? There can be huge value add, and not every franchisor is a great one. Just like any industry, there are really good ones and there's some that aren't so good. And I'd say of the 600 that we work with at any given time, there's probably 50 or 60 that I personally feel are the best of the best. And they've got the profit model. They've got the leadership team with industry and franchise experience. They've got competitive advantages. Current owners in their system are loving their experience. So those are some of the filters that we use on our end to kind of narrow it down before giving them to clients. But yes, and that's kind of how we think about it. Hit on that question one more time. I apologize.
Yeah, just like what are the elements of the deal? Like I know sometimes, there's like what's the advertising, is the national advertising commitment to it, any other elements like that?
Yeah, typically your franchise fee would be up front. Oftentimes that franchise fee where you're buying the rights to a restricted market that you can then market to. Yeah, typically your franchise fee is somewhere in the neighborhood of $50,000. Your second location or second territory is probably like $40,000. Next one might be $35,000. So it is very common to buy multiples to give yourself that path to scale, but that'd be your upfront cost. The royalty would be the ongoing. We also build in what are the startup costs, what are the working capital requirements for 3 months or so. So that's given as a range. And oftentimes our clients are looking at things between $150,000 and $400,000. Certainly some are well north of that, but a lot of opportunities to kind of all in fit those categories. So the royalty, like I said, is typically around 6-7%. It's all about what are you getting in exchange for that. In understanding, oftentimes there is like an extra 1% to 2% advertising cost. And so again, it's just making sure that those make sense to you.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can tell you about an incredible resource my team and I have put together for you. Secrets of Deal-Driven Growth, Creative Ways to Grow Your Business, Even in Challenging Times, is a powerful ebook that helps you take DealQuest podcast episodes and apply them to your own life and business. This is the ideal tool for anyone looking for creative ways to grow as deal makers, and you can get yours now. It's as easy as heading to CoreyCupford.com/workbook and downloading your copy. While you're there, you can also consider joining our dynamic deal-driven community of founders, experts, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. Now back to the show. And let's talk about the level of freedom/control, right? Because that's the thing that could be the double-edged sword depending upon how good your franchisor is, right? And the critics who have had bad experiences will say, oh man, I was restricted from doing all this stuff because my franchisor wouldn't allow it. And then the people who are positive about it are going to say, oh my God, they've created the system that they know works and it was a great thing to follow. So talk about like How much, and listen, the people who might make the argument, go open your own business, don't be a franchisor, they're going to say, you get to be the king or queen of the castle. You can make all the decisions you want. You have nobody looking over your shoulder. But obviously, there's a trade-off in terms of risk and whatever for that. So
as you mentioned, we're both in EO Entrepreneurs Organization, and I've done a handful of deals with EO members. More often times than not, I have to explain to them, you're too entrepreneurial. You want to put your thumbprints all over everything. You don't want to stay within the lines. But what's really fascinating, Corey, is some of these existing business owners that have been there and done that, they come to me and say, wait a minute, we love the idea of starting on third base. We don't have to figure out our technology stack. We don't have to optimize our marketing because it's already been optimized. We love the fact that we can put a manager in place and diversify our portfolio, and they've got a support system on the sidelines. We love the fact that there are others living the same experience in other cities that we can learn from, because that's a huge value add. And we love the fact that there's multiples on the end of the deal from an exit value standpoint, oftentimes higher than non-franchised in like kind of industries. There's been some research that shows that typically they trade at a higher multiple. So once they kind of put that together, I'd say the majority of them have an interest, but there are quite a few that are too entrepreneurial and think they're the smartest guy in the room. You know, when I go back to my days at Shelf Genie franchise system, when I was franchise president there, I supported franchisees all across North America. And I looked at our top performers and our middle of the pack and our bottom performers. I'd say the two things that differentiated our top performers: one, they were good with people. I mean, that could be their employees, that could be their vendors, the franchisor. I mean, that's a given. And number two, they followed the system. And that sounds cliche, but if you come in and you execute on that playbook, your success it's not guaranteed, but it's a pretty good chance.
Right. And the other thing that I guess not everybody, but a lot of franchise systems have, right, is training available as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you can send that manager off to training, let the franchisor train them. I mean, we have a lot of clients that are very hands-off when they get involved in the business. Again, and I own multiple franchises myself. I'm very hands-off. Early on, was I somewhat hands-on? Absolutely. Until the business was stabilized in a good place. So I think you have to go in eyes wide open, understand everyone's situation is different. I will say we're seeing more interest than ever before in franchising. Our biggest challenge is the good opportunities move fast in really good markets. And our challenge is always trying to get our clients to the front of the line. And then I'm calling the franchisors and lobbying on their behalf as to why they should get the first dibs on the territory. So that happens more often than not these days.
Let's talk about where it goes bad. And I'm sure it goes bad a lot less when you're involved because you help the clients through this process, et cetera. But, I'm sure nobody in business has a perfect record. So I don't know if you have particular stories, obviously without any names, or just even in general in the industry, like where do people who are interested in become franchisees make mistakes? Where do the deals go bad?
Yeah, I'd say certainly it is a stronger success rate than in just entrepreneurship in general, but there are times that it doesn't work out. Most of the time what I see is it's more the individual versus the system they bought into. Granted, there are exceptions and there are some systems out there that we're not putting in front of our clients. We don't think the franchisors were ready to franchise maybe when they started offering it, and they didn't have the experience. I want to see franchise experience on that leadership team in addition to industry experience. So I'd say some of the ways that it goes bad, would be, end of the day, it's a small business, right? And so it could be personnel issues. It could be that you had a relative get sick, you have to go care for them. You don't have anyone to watch over things while you're away. I think if you come into a franchise system, you, again, try to be the smartest guy in the room, try to reinvent the wheel. It's like, well, why'd you buy into a franchise to begin with? And so those would be some of the biggest reasons. But more oftentimes, the common denominator is that individual. And maybe it is that they're too tight and not willing to spend on marketing. So they can't drive the business, but they're incurring fixed costs along the way. And they need the volume to leverage those fixed costs. It's just basic business 101, I'd say, is the biggest reason. But every now and then you'll have a franchise system that just shouldn't have been offering franchises in their life cycle just yet.
Right. And listen, I've seen that with clients of yours and friends where, and I remember I was in this is years ago, we were in a thing Michael Gerber was running, obviously, meth and everything, and we had somebody who happened to be a food business. There's an ER in a food business, and he came up with this concept that he had one location. He had a regular restaurant, but then he had sort of a more quick serve kind of concept. And he had one running successfully, and he was already talking about franchises. And I remember Gerber said to him, you need to go replicate this yourself another 1, 2, 3 times before you should even think about becoming a franchisor. So I know we're mostly focusing on the franchisee side, but let's talk about a little bit about what it takes to become a franchisor. When is it appropriate for a business to not even think about franchising?
Yeah, no, it's a great avenue for a lot of businesses, not for everyone. And what I counsel potential franchisors on is there are advantages. I mean, private equity loves franchising. So if you build up, I mean, it can provide for great growth on someone else's dime with a very nice exit down the road. So I mean, there's incentives on the franchisor side. They've just got to keep a tight eye on bringing in the staff and the support for those franchisees, because they're going to have expectations. And otherwise they're going to wake up one day and have kids across North America with expectations of them, and they're trying to keep the kids playing nice and happy, and that's not the world you want to live in, right? So what I encourage a lot of newer franchisors to do is partner with a franchise group, let them handle the sales part. You focus on supporting those new franchisees that you're onboarding. Because it could be a full-time job trying to sell new locations. So
yes.
We've got some great groups that we connect people with there. I encourage them to bring on franchise experience again on that leadership team, someone that has a track record of supporting successful franchisees and knows what that looks like, not just the industry experience. And I'll give a small case study here, because we talked about, hey, if you only have one location, I wouldn't say it's always the case you shouldn't go franchise. I'd say you just have to take a very critical look. Now, I think of a business right now that I've got a lot of clients doing well in, and it's a business, it's wall containment systems, like temporary walls around construction sites, which is so many different industry verticals that have these temporary construction sites going for several months, oftentimes airports, hospitality, retail, hospitals, doctors' offices. And they only had one location when they franchised this business. But there was a lot of meat on the bone from a margin standpoint. So even if you took a conservative approach, because of the small sample size, there were still, the numbers looked pretty good. But what they did was they partnered up with a franchise group who actually took an equity interest in them, a franchise group that has produced multiple successful franchise brands, a lot of successful franchisees over the years. And so now you have that blend of the two, and they've been off to the races.
That's great. Good example. Let's talk about your personal journey a little bit, because in the beginning, I guessed and, was shockingly right that at 8, 10, 12 years old, you weren't planning on being a franchise in the franchise industry. How insightful of me. But so how did you come into this industry? What was your journey?
At age 35, I wasn't planning on being in the franchise industry. So I had a great run on the corporate side, worked for Accenture for many years, and then did some international stints, went back to grad school, and then Fortune 1000 company, Carter's, Oshkosh B'gosh, children's apparel. Never thought I'd be in that industry, but had a good 10-year run with those guys. And just increasing responsibility. But like so many of your listeners, I had that desire to do something a little more entrepreneurial, didn't know what it looked like. So I kind of sidestepped. And so I left public company world, stepped in as president of Shelf Genie, which was a private company. And for me, that's when I really fell in love with the franchise model. When I saw it up close and personal, I saw all these different backgrounds that are now business owners. They're living their dream in different stages of, progress, of course, but fell in love with the model. Ended up partnering with the founder. We spun off. We've invested in franchises ourselves. I've had other partners. We invest in franchises. So most of those for me at this stage are fairly passive, though I was more hands-on in the beginning. But started the consulting side about 5 years ago, and it has just been hockey stick growth. To be honest, it's been able to help. I think I had 75, 80 clients that actually stepped into ownership last year, just me personally. So very active. And I love getting out there and sharing perspectives and thoughts and educating. And like I said, we're seeing more interest than ever before. And I think there's many reasons for that, but I love being able to help people. It's very fulfilling for me.
So you've been only doing the consulting side 5 years. You said previously that you do more deals last year than anyone in the industry. How do you, because there were other players doing this before you got into it, right? So how have you been, what are the keys to your success that have created your company in 5 years to be the largest, doing more deals than anybody else in this industry?
Yeah, I think, again, I don't want to make too stark of comparisons, but I'll just say the way I go about it is definitely looking out for my client's best interest. And I think we could sit on the sidelines forever talking about types of businesses and theorizing. And I think some people do take that approach. My clients are executive level. They want to see real opportunities available in their market. Let's get the conversations going. They're short on time. So I think because of my background, I can relate to them pretty well. Yeah, and so I've just kind of structured my processes to get them, kind of meet them where they are. And I just work with a lot of really good people. I've been very blessed. I mean, franchisors recognize that our clients are really strong candidates oftentimes. And a lot of them are referrals. A lot of them, come from different sources. I put a lot of content out on LinkedIn. I'm, again, trying to educate, never trying to be salesy. That's not me. And to me, I really view myself as a consultant sitting on the same side of the table as them. But certainly my book, Non-Food Franchising, has driven a lot of business as well. And it's been able to educate a lot of people.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the process of writing a book. I wrote a book called Authentic Negotiating. And I will tell you, obviously over my years, I've read a lot of business books and I read also, nonfiction and fiction, right? And I've always appreciated authors, but until I wrote a book, I got a much deeper level of appreciation, especially because we had this thing that we talked about like forum and around EO where, that most business books could be an article. Like they have an article worth of quality content and then they have another 150 pages because you can't, because it's better to have a book. And I was intent on nobody ever being able to say that about my book, have every page have quality in it. So it was a process for me, I got to tell you, and I got a lot of respect for authors and people who do that. Talk to me a little bit about your process around creating the book, writing the book.
Life is, life doesn't slow down while you take the time to write a book. And when you've got young kids, I was up early Saturday, Sunday mornings, cranking out content. I did have a great kind of co-writer or ghostwriter that pieced it together. I pumped out the content. He helped it flow together. And just a great book publishing company too, that had leaned in and helped. And I'm happy to refer them to whoever, but no, it felt good when it was out the door, but like you, I wanted to make it very readable. We'll write about 90-ish pages and try to pack it with content. It's got great feedback. So it's an easy read. You can read it on an airplane, but you get a whole lot of content. So a lot of my clients have read it by the time that we have our first call. And so it just helps us, again, start a little bit further down the path. Yeah.
And listen, the whole being top of mind, authority marketing, that's something that for me as a business, as a lawyer, right? We fortunately built a very, successful and great firm. But before I wrote the book, I was looking to say, how do I really keep top of mind? How do I create myself, have more people understand outside of my direct context that I am an authority in this area in terms of deals and negotiating or whatever. One of the reasons I do this podcast, honestly, for me, is the most fun I have every week is just talking about deals with people. But it really is a great way to do it if you do it right. And I'm assuming, just because doing books is a deal, right? Whether you do it with a major publisher or probably, it sounds like you probably went with a hybrid business publisher like I did. I happen to do Advantage Media, which is formerly Adam
Whitty and those guys, absolutely.
Yeah, and there are others out there who have you work with. But my point is that I'm guessing that your business model around the book, like you're not getting rich off the book, right?
No, 100% of proceeds go to Hope International. It's a great nonprofit that we support. But I give out free copies all the time. That's how I justify paying my kids in the business. They package the books and send them for me. So let them flow that money into a Roth IRA. I love business ownership, so many tax advantages. But no, in all seriousness, I also send a lot of downloadable links. So any of your listeners, if they come out to our website, share their email address, we'll respond with whether it be the Audible version or PDF version, multiple formats that they can download.
Love that. So I'm just going to open it up. Talk to me about this. Like I said, there's could be hours of questions and content we could talk about here, but anything particularly going on in the franchise world now, trends, developments, key things that you think the audience would be interested in?
Yeah, I'd say right now, I've always got an eye on the tax code, just as whether it be QBI or what other topics are coming up. Of course, it's an election year. I know there's some legislation currently underway right now that just passed the House. And so, I keep a close eye there. As far as things that could really impact the industry, not a whole lot. We do see some variance by state. There are 13 states that we call registration states where the state government has to sign off on new licenses every year to be able to go off and sell new licenses. So I'd say they're as slow as usual in those 13 states, as you might imagine. But no, again, more interest than ever before. And I think that, people just they want that control. I just had lunch today with a gentleman. He's been in W-2 for many, many years, but he's like, maybe now's the time to scratch the itch. Maybe now's the time. And there's a little bit of FOMO. They look around and it's like, gosh, most of the successful folks I know are business owners of different stripes. And what I love seeing, and this is part of what I educate on, is just the types of businesses out there, things that people never had on their radar, the riches and the niches. We've got one, it's tiny homes now. It's great. It's, just cool concepts that you're like, wait a minute, there's a housing shortage need out there. Also Airbnbs, that can be a great avenue for tiny homes. And that's where I get a lot of joy is seeing the light bulbs go on.
Love that. Let's talk about financing, because it's certainly when the fall way people think around food financing. If you're going to buy a McDonald's franchise, you got significant investment. Some of the stuff you do may be at that level, or maybe it's a lower capital cost, because not only are you buying into the franchise, but you also got to deal with real estate, building, and whatever, and some of these things. Obviously, a lot of non-food franchises, I'm guessing, are renting space, so maybe you don't have that. But still, I mean, access to capital, right? Financing opportunities. And so talk to me about that landscape. Are franchisors, do most of them have financing arms? Are people getting outside capital? We talked about the impact, obviously, on real estate investment of interest rates. Has that played a role here?
Yeah, certainly there's some very large placements out there similar to real estate or similar to food placements. However, oftentimes these companies don't require a customer-facing retail location, and therefore you're able to stand them up, much more inexpensively. So again, that range I gave of 150,000 to 400,000, probably 80% of our clients fall into that category as far as what they're spending. And that could even be for multiple territories in some cases. But to fund that, some are using cash. I'd say probably half of our clients use an SBA loan, and that's where you put in maybe 50 to 100,000 in cash. Then you leverage and finance the rest. Obviously, rates have gone up. They're around 10% today, which there's still a little bit sticker shock. But of course, that interest is tax deductible. We've got some great funding partners that help our clients. They work with franchise-friendly lenders. So yeah, we're doing these loans all day, every day. One thing I was going to mention too that we hadn't hit on, Corey, when we think about food and we think about these different industries, brand is so important in some categories, fitness, right, food, hotels, right? But in so many other industries, what you're buying, it's less about the brand. It's more about the systems and the support and the training and everything else, the procurement, the supply chain, let's say. I think about the insulation industry as an example. That's a $53 billion industry. And most people couldn't name a single insulation company, much less two companies. And so there are industries like that that are just ripe for a brand to come into, do things a little more professionally, and the bar is usually pretty low in the industry.
Got it. So I guess it's interesting because obviously at this, let's say on average, maybe lower buy-in opportunity, and the fact that especially with your executive investors, I guess a lot of them, the financing, I guess, is less of, it's not, it exists, but it's less of a hurdle or an issue than some other businesses.
Yeah. And one other thing I failed to mention, outside of SBA loans, it's also common to use an old retirement plan, a 401k or IRA from a previous employer, and rolling that over. It's what's called a ROBS program. You have to set up as a C Corp. There's a few hurdles you have to jump through, but that's very common too. I'd say as many as a third of our clients will use the ROBS program.
Oh, that's great. That's a great point. Do you find, I don't know why, it's popped into my mind a couple of times, and his name is so I'll just trust and ask it. So we had a guest on, I don't remember what episode it is, but the listeners can look back. Bruce Marks, he's at a bank. He does a lot of SBA lending, and he works with a lot of searchers, right? That's his focus. Like people who are either coming out of the military or coming out of corporate America, whatever, and like they have this desire to be a business owner and they're searching for a profit. Like that's his niche on who he works with. So that was a fascinating interview, listeners. You may want to listen back on that. Do you find that that those kind of people are part of who are looking for these franchise opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, everyone's starting from a different spot. I mean, we've got everyone from school teachers, a lot of military personnel who know how to follow a system. They've got the discipline. Right. Franchisors love them. They usually give the military a discount as well on the franchise fee. But we've got healthcare professionals, a lot of IT professionals, a lot of B2B sales folks, so many different backgrounds, but a lot of doctors, a lot of lawyers getting involved. And so, yeah, and want to be a business owner, but they just feel like they need almost like the training wheels of a franchise system. And what I tell them is over time, let's start with the end in mind. Over time, it's very common to build out a portfolio of companies. They may complement or they may diversify from each other. It's not that everyone has to be a franchise, but if you start with a franchise, then you're going to have some really good building blocks and a framework of how you stand up a business that you can then go replicate with others. But a lot of our clients do stick with the franchise path, and I call it franchise stacking. I've got one client, he does $35 million a year in revenue across 30 different territories, across 6 different franchise brands. And he's just kind of perfected standing up a business, giving a young person some responsibility and some equity in his case. And he actually coaches some of our clients. I set them up for some calls with them. But yeah, they're different case studies, but everyone's at a different spot, but all different types of backgrounds.
I love that. It's funny, you mentioned doctors several times, and back in the 80s and 90s, it used to be when companies were looking to raise money, I'm talking about startups through private placements, like that was the go-to people, it was doctors, right? And there was a behind the scenes sort of joke that it was smart people with dumb money, because they were really smart. Doctors are really smart in terms of what they do, but in terms of investing, they just had this excess cash. They had no time to really do due diligence, whatever. And if they got excited about something, they'd write a check for 50 or 100 or $250,000 or whatever it is. And so it was smart people with dumb money. And then that dried up because the doctors, over a decade or two or 15 years, whatever, they figured out their return on investment wasn't so good because they weren't doing a good job figuring out where to put their money, right? So it's interesting that doctors are a good, and I'm guessing, I don't know this, but I do know it, that they've got to be doing a lot better investing in franchises than they were on the roulette wheel of picking startup companies with no due diligence, really.
I would think so. And there's so many resources available to doctors and medical professionals now. Yeah, I think of like the White Coat Investor podcast, and he puts out a blog. Jim Dolly, and I went on their show a while back, and that led to a lot of interest as well. And so, but they do a great job at financially educating them. What I found is a lot of medical professionals, just like others, maybe in other industries, say, "Hey, I've got an entrepreneurial itch. I also have a business itch." They're not going to utilize business in their day-to-day lives, but there's still a part of them that loves that. I had two doctors recently. It was a couple that bought into a property services company. Their plan was just to have a manager run the business. Well, the wife decided she started falling in love with the business, and she actually left her medical career to get more hands-on. And so Everyone's wired differently, but we doctors, it's still a small percentage of our total, but I'd say it's been a growing number.
Sure. Love it. Okay. Before I ask you my final two questions, any last thoughts? Anything else you want to share with the audience?
I think we covered a lot of ground. I'd love to share a free copy of the book with all of your listeners, so we can touch more on that at the end, but certainly come out to our website and we'll make sure.
Well, that's a perfect segue, because my second to last question is, where can people find out more about you and the book and everything else? Where can they go?
Yeah, come out to our website, franbridgeconsulting.com, FRAN bridgeconsulting.com, and just leave your email address and name, and we will reach out to you with links to download the book and add you to our newsletter list. We put out great content once a month as well. Yeah, but follow me on LinkedIn as well. That's my favorite social platform, and try to put content out there most days, and we've gotten good feedback on that.
Great, John. So my final question on the podcast is always about my highest value in life, my highest ideal, which is freedom. And for me, that means everything from freedom from oppression for all people around the world to why I've been an entrepreneur for decades and haven't had a boss. What does freedom mean to you, and how does it impact your life and business?
Yeah, I pinch myself every day. Not only that I live in a free country, and we thank the men and women that gave that to us, but I believe it's God-given freedom, but also pinch myself every day because I'm free from working for a boss. For so many years, I was in that corporate environment, had a good run, could have done it forever, but I have not one single day looked back and wish I hadn't made the decision I made. So feel very blessed, and trying to help others find that same realization.
I love that. And listen, that's a great thing about what you do. I do it in a different way because we help so many people launch new businesses, whether it's our investment advisor clients who are leaving wirehouses, Merrill Lynch, to become independent entrepreneurs, or it's the folks we do in other industries. And just supporting other people to get free is a fun thing, right?
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. And when we have clients come back and buy additional territories or additional brands, or they refer their brother, that's where I get my validation. I know, hey, what I'm doing is really making a difference.
Love that. John Ostenson, thank you for being such a great guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Enjoyed it, Corey. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. The Deal Den is a place where entrepreneurs, high-level executives, and business leaders come together, support each other's growth and success, and share what's working best, as well as what challenges we are facing right now. You will get input not only from me, but from all of our members. We collaborate and serve each other. To join us, go to corykupfer.com/DealDen. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.